We return to our series on the Coal Wars of the United States with Bloody Harlan and the Battle for Everts. These battles will end the Coal Wars proper. However, the battle continues to this day. Before this war is over, it is not known exactly how many miners, coal operators, deputies, and bosses will be killed. Sadly, the state and federal troopers would occupy the county several times. However, after the dust was clear, the anti-labor coal country would end up being represented by unions. Unlike the previous coal wars that took place in West Virginia, with the Paint Creek strike of 1912 and Mate 1, the Harlan County Wars took on its own epic spin on the ongoing fight between labor disputes and the coal operators and owners. Mostly the miners were fighting for improved working conditions, higher wages, and better housing options for their families. Miners also wanted the right to organize and to have a union. They wanted to be able to spend their money at a store of their choice besides the Black Mountain Coal Company store located in Harlan, Kentucky. The miners would be fired if they refused to spend their paychecks only in that store. The Kentucky mining camps still had the paternalism idea in their midst, and the ever-independent Appalachian people were not having it. As discussed in a previous video, paternalism is the practice of people who have a business or other authority to restrict the freedoms of those who were subordinate to them. If those under them behave in an approved manner, then they receive housing, work, food, and other perks of their position. If, for example, they did not behave in a way that the companies wanted them to, they would lose all of their benefits up to and including their jobs. The Great Depression of 1929 through the late 1930s hit Harlan County, Kentucky. In response, the coal owners and operators decided to sell their fuel at below cost to increase the national dependency upon coal. To prevent operating at a loss, on February 16, 1931, the Harlan County Coal Operators Association decided to cut all wages by 10%. The decision caused unrest in the county among the miners. This action did not go unnoticed by the labor unions, and the United Mine Workers Union decided to attempt to organize the already impoverished labor force of the area. Attempts to organize led to the dismissal of employees who were suspected of having leanings toward organization and having them evicted from their family homes. The remaining workforce then went on strike as a sign of solidarity with those that were fired from their jobs. There were only 900 miners working, and 5,800 miners were idle and striking during the first strike. This was 13% of the workers showing up for their scheduled work times. 3 Harlan County incorporated towns were not owned by the coal mines. They became a sanctuary for the evicted and starving miners. One of the towns that was a refuge was Evarts, Kentucky. Evarts welcomed the miners because it was filled with spurned politicians and business owners who wished to see the company stores and company men in political positions vanish. The strikebreakers were under the protection of the private mine guards. These guards were legally able to protect these men during their off-duty time. They exercised their powers with impunity and operated under Sheriff J. H. Blair. Blair made it clear that he was on the side of the mine operators, and the people of the county lost any illusion that the law enforcement would be impartial in this strike. At first there were little battles with gunshots being exchanged between the strikers and the private guards and the law enforcement agencies. Strikebreakers were often beaten. On May 5, 1931, the Battle of Everts began. It was the most violent attack of the Harlan County Coal Wars. It would only last 15 minutes in total, but it would forever change the name of Harlan County to Bloody Harlan. Miners laid an ambush on the day of May 5, 1931, near the Evarts Railroad crossing. The mining company had ordered a motorcade to deliver food and supplies to the strike breakers known as scabs. There were only 3 cars in the motorcade, each of which contained a deputy sheriff. As the motorcade approached, a single shot rang out in the air. It is unclear who fired that shot, but both sides claim that the other side did it. The motorcade stopped and the deputies got out of the cars to return the fire. There were shots exchanged and all 3 deputies and 1 strikebreaker was killed. Over 1,000 shots were exchanged during those 15 minutes. One of the deputies was Jim Daniels. Daniels was one of the most hated deputies in the county due to his anti-union views and his previous actions during the strike. In response to the violence, the Kentucky National Guard were called upon and arrived for the first time to the county to try to stem the violence. Looking for protection by the Kentucky National Guard, many were surprised to find that they broke the picket lines instead. On May 24, 1931, Sheriff Blair rescinded the miners' rights to assemble and tear-gassed a Union rally. On June 17th of that same year, the first strike was over, as the last miner had returned to work. No concessions or deals were made between the 2 factions, and the membership of the United Mine Workers Union plummeted. The coal companies refused to back down from their positions and change anything. 8 miners were sentenced to life in prison for the actions that were taken on May 5, 1931. They were all convicted on charges of conspiracy to murder. After the Battle of Everts, the Red Cross and the United Mine Workers Union refused to help the striking miners on the basis that it was now an industrial conflict that needed to be resolved internally. The United Mine Workers Union also cited that they did not have the resources to help in the battle. No help came to those who were in starving situations due to no money to spend on food and no admittance to the company store unless they were gainfully employed by the coal mine. With the opening left by the United Mine Workers Union, the openly communist National Miners Union tried to help the miners to organize. The radical theology of the Union began gaining some ground in the mountains. There were 10 lodges that were chartered for the National Miners Union. However, they did make a greater effort than the United Mine Workers with relief as they opened soup kitchens around the country. They made several attempts at holding strikes against the coal companies, but these failed in Harlan County. Their foothold there ultimately ended because of the local clergy, who were also labor organizers, found out that the Union communist in nature and held animosity toward religion. This caused the clergy to denounce the Union. Harry Sims, who was a young Communist League organizer, was also killed in Harlan. The Red Cross eventually became involved in the county along with several local charities. These charities began to give aid to the blacklisted miners who were unable to find employment, as the soup kitchens had closed once the National Miners Union had closed its doors. As part of his New Deal, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt presented and had passed the National Industrial Act. This law was enacted to try to reverse the hardships to those that were out of a job because of the economic collapse of the Great Depression. The act was an attempt to restructure the industrial sector of the economy and to alleviate unemployment with its public works program. Under this act, the right to organize in one's workplace was granted, as well as it was outlawed to have any discrimination, whether employed or seeking employment, based on union membership. Yellow Dog contracts. These were contracts that the employees were forced to sign to agree to never organize into a union before they were employed with a coal company. It was also illegal for company unions, blacklists, all tactics that were employed by the companies to bust up unions, and discrimination based on a union activity were all outlawed under this act. Based on this new act, from October 27, 1933 to March 31, 1935, the mines ran as an open shop. An open shop is where the union membership is allowed, but not mandated to work at that location. All these locations, the mine wages began to be comparable to those of the other jobs around the nation. Even though things were doing better for the unions in Harlan County, there was still civil unrest. The miners and the coal owners were still having disputes. Sheriff Blair was voted out of his office in 1933 and died just a year later. Sheriff T.R. Middleton replaced Blair under the pro-union campaign platform. The disputes were still brewing when on December 8, 1934, the United Mine Workers Union were threatened by deputies and mine bosses. The United Mine Workers Union called the National Guard to help them, only to be escorted to the county line and told not to return. The National Industrial Recovery Act only partially succeeded in accomplishing its stated goals when it was deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court on May 27, 1935, which was 3 weeks before the act was set to expire. With this Supreme Court ruling, all but one of the open shops in Harlan County went back to the previous mine operations. The Wagner Act of 1935, National Labor Union Retaliation Act, or NLRA, granted the rights of workers to choose to organize, outlining the legal framework for labor unions and management relations to improve the working conditions for workers, with the added protections for workers and the addition of a collective bargaining between the workers and their employers. There was an addition to where the miners could choose their own representation for these negotiations. The Act also made provisions for the National Labor Relations Board to designate a legal structure for the workers to conduct fair and legal elections and their officers and representatives. With the passage of these acts, there was unrest in Harlan County. In Harlan County on July 7, 1935, during a celebration of the Wagner Act, a group of disgruntled deputies severely beat up several miners and dispersed the crowd. Troops had to be called into the county 3 times to maintain order. On September 4, 1935, Harlan County Attorney Elman Clay Middleton, age 31, was assassinated by a car bomb containing 18 sticks of dynamite. Someone had planted dynamite in his automobile, and when he started it up, the car blew up. Middleton died on the scene. It is thought that Middleton was assassinated for backing troops who were present in the county to protect the miners. Others claim that his death was caused by an election concerning slot machines into the county. 4 men were arrested in connection with his murder. On September 9, 1935, for the first time since the beginning of the war, troops were dispatched to Harlan County on behalf of the miners by the governor of the state of Kentucky. There were constant beatings of miners by the sheriff deputies. An investigation was conducted on terrorism in Kentucky coal fields. A committee was formed and conducted by activist Theodore Dresser under the auspices of the National Committee for the Defense of the Political Prisoners, or the NCDPP. The National Committee for the Defense of the Political Prisoners was of the American Communist Party. Several folk singers and other artists toured the United States to raise money during the strikes. California labor activist Carolyn Decker also raised money for the relief of the striking miner efforts. Finally, in 1939, the coal companies agreed to allow unions in their coal mine operations. The United Mine Workers of America represented 400,000 miners at that point and promised miners safer work conditions and higher wages. The unrest continues in Harlan County and surrounding counties as there have been many strikes. The most memorable of these were in 1964, 1966, 1969, where the West Virginia Black Lung Strike that the miners actually won, 1971 and 1974. There are still ongoing strikes today, and the violence in Harlan County still continues. The latest unrest in Harlan County came in July of 2019. Black Jewel LLC filed for bankruptcy and liquidation. A federal bankruptcy judge ruled that the company could leave damage to the environment, abandon assets, and not pay the coal miners owed wages. From July 30th, 2019 through September 28th, 2019, coal miners and their families have blocked roads and railways demanding their payment. As of the date of this posting of this article, the suit is still in litigation. Here at Kentucky Tennessee Living, we fully support the coal miners and their families. I have found that many things have not been taught to the future generations about the struggles for the coal miner rights that have been in the Appalachian Mountains. We hope that you have enjoyed our stop in Bloody Harlan and the history of the longest and still ongoing coal struggles of the United States. Please like, subscribe, and share below. Also hit the bell for notifications of future videos. And once again, be sure to leave us a "Hey y'all" in the comment section below. Thank you for continuing to support us and watch our videos.